This project was started last semester. Last semester, we researched the representation of Asian American women at Berkeley. That included students, faculty, and staff. Asian women comprised the largest pool of the undergraduate students. However, very few have gone on to pursue academic career relative to other major demographic groups. This semester, we are taking a journalistic approach and carry out interviews with Asian women students and faculty. We will discuss the social, cultural, and family environment that made us a unique demographic group. By sharing our experiences, we hope to better understand ourselves, our identity, and our unique presence in our society. The ultimate goal of this project is to uplift Asian women across the campus. Hopefully, we will all achieve our highest potential and live happy and productive lives.
I'm Crystal Wang. Currently, I'm a sophomore studying computer science and linguistics.
My name is Calma. I am a recent MCV graduate from the class of 2020 at Berkeley.
Hi, I'm Darae Chen. I was also a graduate student at UC Berkeley Plant Microbial Biology.
Hi everyone, my name is Eunice, Kwon. I use she, her pronouns. I did my undergrad and graduate studies here. I got a master's in city planning, CED. And I am currently the director of the Asian Pacific American Student Development Office, which is in the Equity and Inclusion Division on campus.
I'm Helen Liu, currently a third-year graduate student in the plant biology program at UC Berkeley.
I am Neem Patel. I am a fourth-year graduate student now in plant and microbial biology.
I'm Renee's son. I'm a retired professor, having served for 40 years on the Berkeley faculty.
My name is Lydia Sohn. I'm a professor in mechanical engineering and a core member of the UCSF UC Berkeley Bioengineering Graduate Program.
My name is Sook. I came to Berkeley as a senior faculty, and I'm a professor and chair of the Department of Nutritional Science and Toxicology.
I'm Michi Taga, and I've been a faculty member at UC Berkeley for almost 12 years.
My name is Dipti Nayak. I'm currently an assistant professor in the Department of Molecular and Cell Biology at UC Berkeley, where I started about a year ago.
So in terms of glass ceiling, the glass ceiling was a term coined to depict the barriers women face in their career advancement. Well, there is another term, bamboo ceiling, that describes the barriers Asians face in their career advancements. Well, we face both ceilings, glass ceiling and bamboo ceiling. Also, career advancement has a lot to do with the degree of respect one receives from one's colleagues and superiors. In my case, I felt my colleagues basically ignored me. For example, I'd never been asked to serve on important departmental committees. In the 90s, I served as the associate dean in the graduate division on recommendation of people outside of the department who knew my efforts in promoting diversity. When Proposition 209 was implemented in 1996, my staff and I took the lead to revise the graduate admissions policies so that we can still maintain some diversity among our graduate student population in the absence of race and gender-based admissions criteria that was stipulated by Proposition 209. However, back in the department, I was never invited to be involved in the graduate admissions or diversity affairs. But I would like to point out that in the past 10, 15 years, the department's faculty composition has changed and the climate has improved a great deal. We have hired many women, including minority women. I think they are respected and they were certainly not being benignly neglected as I have been.
A lot of people would talk about immigration in a negative way, where I felt very scared to talk about my experiences as an immigrant. And so I kind of held my background in very quietly to myself. There's been a lot of racist comments made to me. And one of the extreme ones would go as like someone writing, "Go back to your country," in Sharpie on my locker.
So I was the only person that looked like myself and came from a background similar to myself. And so I think people could not understand how to relate to me or interact with me. So in terms of that, yes, they would use a lot of like hateful language and not very inclusive.
I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and when I was a young kid, I was the only person of color in my class. Usually everyone I knew was white, except for my own family. I knew from really early on that I was different. At my school, different families had the opportunity to host a foreign exchange student, but people at my school thought that my family shouldn't host a foreign exchange student because the exchange student would be deprived of having a real American experience, because my father was born and raised in Japan, and that made our family not really American. I probably experienced microaggressions like at least once a week, I would say. I didn't know the word microaggression until much later. And in fact, when I first heard the word microaggression, I felt like my whole life sort of clicked in place. Like no one had to tell me what it meant. It was just, oh, okay, now I understand there's this word for it.
I don't think that I really experienced a difference in like how I was treated at school versus at home, because I think my parents were, they always wanted to give me like the like quintessential like American child experience, and a lot of that came from like, I guess, like not treating me differently because I was a girl and like an Asian girl.
One thing I did notice that we didn't have a lot of Asian American or Asian, graduate students, and not as many postdocs as well.
Yes, I would like definitely love to see more like South Asian or just women of color in our faculty.
In terms of experiencing bias, I don't think I've experienced bias directed at me. However, I have had interactions that have been unpleasant and I think have been goaded by my ethnic background in my training as a postdoc. Someone came up to me who just found out that their grant had gotten rejected by a funding agency. And they looked at me and they told me, well, if you'd sent this, you would have gotten it. And the implication was, it's not the science, it's the person who writes. You know, in moments like this, you wonder kind of the things that you get, do you get it for reasons that are not just based on how good you are, but more on the color of your skin or kind of what you represent in terms of the academic composition of the departments you're in or the institutions you're going to be a part of.
When I had twins, the pediatrician had asked me what language was I going to teach my children? Was I going to teach them my language? And I was so shocked. And I finally said, do you mean I'm going to be teaching them English? That's my primary language. Another case was actually for a merit review that I had with a different chair. He came to my office and he said, well, the merit review didn't go through. You have this and this option. And he says, the main problem is you're not a mechanical engineer. And all I could say was, I'm sorry. And his response was, well, don't worry. You do serve a purpose for this department. You serve the diversity aspect. So he didn't really care about my research or my teaching. All that cared about was the color of my skin and how I looked.
I personally have experienced discrimination, and I had to fight against the injustice alone. Once something quite egregious happened to me, I decided to bring my complaint against the Dean's Office to the Academic Senate Committee, the Privilege and Tenure Committee. The committee held hearings on the matter, and they determined that the Associate Dean was in the wrong, and I won my case. This was not the only case that I won, but those who were found to be wrong never really suffered any consequences. And this is why it's very hard to change the system.
I've seen really qualified Asian American women being passed over for those roles, passed over in a way where they're described as not having the typical leadership qualities that they're looking for, or they're actually seen as not desiring that role, or not having that ambition, even if they're, the assistant dean or the associate vice chancellor.
I was having this conversation with a peer, and I have been told blatantly by a few sets of people that I must have had it easy because I wasn't a person of color. No, I told them I'm a person of color, I'm Asian, and I know my own experiences will never be able to compare with yours, but I have my own set of obstacles and experiences that I have overcome as a first-generation Filipino immigrant.
I was very interested in agriculture. Like, I wanted to go farm. I wanted to, solve world hunger, essentially. And from my parents' point of view, who are Chinese immigrants, they're engineers, they thought, how is that a profitable job, a career choice? And I think I fought with my parents, like, this is a viable choice because I'm very passionate in this particular area of research, in this area of subject matter, and I know that if I put the time and effort into it, I can succeed. So the second challenge I faced was actually within the crop sciences department that I was in for my undergraduate degree. So I was the first Asian that they have ever interacted with their entire lives, and I was sitting amongst them in class. And so when we had to do a group project or something, they would release some microaggressions.
So I think my experiences and the challenges I encountered growing up in the South are more specifically shaped by me being a brown presenting woman. A lot of my challenges were being not taken seriously academically. In college, I had to work 3 jobs to help support myself and put myself through school. And so sometimes my performance in courses was not amazing, and a lot of people used that to push me down, at least like the advisors did. And so that was a challenge I had to overcome to prove myself that even though I come from a low-income background and I work a lot and maybe my performance hasn't been good, I can still excel academically. I guess the other part of that was being silenced more often when I wanted to speak up about certain just opinions I may have, and feeling like I was unseen.
Growing up as an immigrant and a queer person in that community, I think just a lot of the life choices that I saw modeled for women in my community were non-starters for me. And the challenge for me was how do I fit in here? How do I fit in this world if I don't fit in my community? And so I think just meeting folks who really help me understand and contextualize, not just the experiences that make me who I am, but also looking at my mom and my aunts, and I had thought that they had this very flat experience of being traditional Korean American women, but learning from Asian American studies and going back and asking them questions, learning their context that informed these decisions that I had judged in my community, I think also helped build that bridge for my parents to better understand me and the context that were shaping me. So I think I don't know if I've overcome all the challenges, but I think definitely one of the things that helped me was to ask questions and learn where people were coming from.
I was not discriminated before, and I can fight for that. But although we have an Asian culture, so we have to do our part before demanding anything. So the way I dealt with is do more, do better, go up higher in my scholarly work. And That's the way I dealt with. I think that if I think of that all the Asian women have to speak up, otherwise you won't get appreciated for your value. Speaking up is important, and I do start speaking up in places. It's been getting better. So even in Berkeley, in a larger context, I think the situation is better than when I first came here 20 years ago.
The impact of these fights are that it's very time consuming and taxing on one's mental state. Certainly had a very negative impact on one's career. So I thought that the reason I could overcome these challenges and stand up for myself was because I grew up as a member of the majority in Taiwan. And that gave me confidence and inner strength to face adverse situations. Now, I realized that growing up as a majority is an advantage because I learned from my Asian American students, women students who were born here in the US and grew up as a minority. They suffered the stereotypical bias against Asian women. That had deprived them of their self-confidence to stand up to authority and to pursue careers in competitive professional fields, like being an academician, a professor.
Even my graduate students are like, we have to practice. In case someone says an insult to you, you need to know how to respond, or we're going to put an earpiece into your ear. And it is a strange situation that I'm in because I was raised as American. As I mentioned, a friend in grad school told me I have two sides, one that I'm very American and then one that I'm very Asian. And sometimes the very Asian part of me just works against the very American part of me. But I do believe that we need to have more Asian women on campus. I do believe it is a question of critical mass.
I'm still very junior as a faculty, but I think more and more I'm recognizing that even as a South Asian women, I mean, South Asian families are often very academically inclined. So we often end up in colleges and in graduate school, but there is a leaky pipeline. And I think it has a lot to do with not having enough role models. So that is the way forward.
Like two things, an intrinsic and extrinsic factor. So my intrinsic accomplishment was being the first in my family to graduate from anywhere here in the US. Like back when I was growing up in the Philippines, I never really thought of going to college, much less going to like a really good public university, the number one, by the way. My intrinsic accomplishment, I would say, it was my switch from this, I would think like a trivial mindset. When I first immigrated here, all I could think about was to be able to assimilate well into the American culture, right? Like I didn't want to be bullied, but all I could really think of was like, speaking and turning into like fully fledged American. Like I wasn't really fluent in speaking English before I immigrated here. I was able to understand it well, but I wasn't able to like communicate as well as I do now. But now, like, I'm really proud as years like pass by, I'm really proud to have switched from that mindset of just assimilating into actually caring about like the community around me and taking part in the community around me to help like other people out that have the same experiences as me, or might have a different experience, but like something that I could help them like reach their potential. So yeah.
And in terms of extrinsic, I'm also, first one to get a higher degree. So I got my PhD at Berkeley last year. And from my parents' generation, it's kind of hard to even get like a college degree on top of that, women getting a degree. So it was kind of a big deal, as well as, and, receiving an SF fellowship to support me through graduate school. And something else is I won Miss Asian America 2018 from a beauty pageant. So, being able to be kind of well-rounded, that's something like an extrinsic value that I can show for. But in terms of intrinsic, which I think it's been such a struggle for me all my life, life, and I finally recently have really come in terms with it and kind of recognizing it was definitely a lot to do with culture as well, is that first, like, I kind of started off trying to break away from tradition, just because even though I have lived probably 2/3 of my life in the States, so because I grew up with Asian values from Korea and my household is Korean, there's some ideas that kind of stayed with me for a really, really long time. And so, like, I broke tradition by proposing to my Chinese husband. And for me, that action speaks more than words, obviously. You know, like, I actually used to talk about this idea with other Asian people, and other Asian women would be like, why would you do that? Or even in general, women would be like, why would you do that? But especially Asian women, they're like, no, you're supposed to let the men do it. And in some ways, it was really hard for me to make a decision to do this or not because I felt that he had to be the one making this big decision in our lives when it's both of us, you know, making that huge decision to be together. But it was more of the idea as like, well, am I going to embarrass him because he's still going to be the one having to tell his family and his like Asian friends, what are they going to say? I was more worried about that aspect than, you know, like me proposing to him. And also some of the other things I've done is like breaking away from some of the Korean ideals that were toxic to me in my life. Also in Asian culture, you have this idea of have to be thick, skinny, and that you should be able to put an A4 paper around your waist. And if your waist is bigger than that, then you're not skinny. And trying to kind of drop that kind of ideal and looking at scale and trying to be skinny into that perfect, beautiful Asian person has been really a struggle. And recently I became a part-time fitness coach because I'm really, you know, trying to move towards being healthy and being fit and being just being content with myself instead of trying to mold into that Asian ideal.
Proudest moment as an Asian American woman, I mean, like, I'm only a sophomore in college right now, so my big moment happened in high school. I started getting a lot more politically active, and it was like, despite the fact that I was kind of raised in an environment where like a lot of immigrants, they come over and they're like, okay, keep your head down, we're not going to do anything. You know, if the government does something, you just suck it up and roll with it. And then so when I was like 15 or 16, I was like, that's stupid. And I really got involved with my school and like my community's like feminist organizations. And then when I was a sophomore, I helped organize this foundation called Girl Up, which is associated with like the United Nations Foundation. And so I participated in my school's like chapter of it. And we started a conference that has been like recurring annually since, to raise awareness about issues that women face, like both like in the United States and around the world. And something that really was like the aha moment for me, that I was like, I'm so proud of myself, was I really started the conversation at my school around menstruation, because like, you know, I think especially for Asian women, it's like a taboo. Like, you don't talk about menstruation, you don't talk about abortion, you don't talk about like female sexual health. And so really bringing students' attention, like not just like female students, but like the entire school, like this entire student body's attention to like important things regarding like women's health that they may not have known about, was something that I felt very strongly about. And yeah, I just felt in that moment that I had like really broken out of like the apolitical, like kind of docile Asian woman stereotype. And like, I think that really would be my proudest accomplishment.
So intrinsic in the sense that I grew up in a very, you know, stereotypical Chinese household where it's quite patriarchal. I got into high school where I finally found my voice, finally found my bravery in terms to stand up to my parents. I guess the intrinsic is that growing up in Chinese households, they teach you to be humble. And so growing up, I was always told that I was just a little bit above average. I wasn't smart. I wasn't, you know, okay. I was a little bit above average. And when they said that if a person's to get a PhD, they have to be smart. They have to be really smart. And being told your entire life that you're just above average, I grew up never thinking that I will ever be able to get a PhD. But here I am, the first woman, first person in my entire family to be in a PhD program and on my way to completing my PhD. And so I think that's my biggest accomplishment thus far.
Having immigrated here in 2010, I never once saw one Filipino professor. Like, no, I've never seen a Filipino scientist here in America. So I think one dream I would have is just to see more representation of Filipino American women, or just Filipino Americans in general in academia or in any STEM. But personally, moving forward, I would like to graduate from a graduate school of some sort. Still trying to decide where and what kind of program. And once I'm there and I have the jurisdiction to develop a program, I would love to advocate for programs that would help women and individuals from underrepresented backgrounds to break the glass ceiling prominent in our society.
I'm very interested in labor law because I used to work at the Labor Commissioner's Office for California, and a lot of people that came in who came in with wage claims were immigrants, and the main barrier that they had was like fear of like deportation, or they didn't really speak English well, so they like were really unable to communicate and fight for their rights on their own. And so I would really like to be like an advocate for them, because labor law is like, there's so many laws regarding it, and if you're not really sure of your rights, like they can be exploited so easily. And the second thing is that I really love foreign languages, and I'm especially interested in like translation. And I think this also like subconsciously like ties back into like being an Asian American woman, because like hearing all these stories in like the Asian community about like the 7-year-old kid and like having to like fill out government documents for your parents because your parents like don't speak English well, or they don't understand it well. And so like I think it would be super neat to be able to build something in the future that could provide like fast and accurate translation, or even help like translators, so that like everyone will be able to get the resources they need in a language that they understand.
So for my dream is particularly, it's related to Jamie in the sense that like I am in a graduate program, I am in a position to be able to move up at least in academic hierarchy essentially, and to break the barrier of seeing more Asian women in postdoc positions or more higher up research positions. I would like to be one of those, I would like to be set the example of that, but also using that, whatever positions I attain, help inspire another generation of Asian American women to do science. Because I think A, there needs to be an inspiration, and B, another person to tell that person, this is a viable job option. You know, you're not limited to just 3 highly profitable options that's very popular in your community. You are able to break 3 of the stereotypes, and you're able to pursue science if you would like to. And I think that's part of it is giving that motivation. Another part of it is giving that opportunity.
It was really strange given how many Asian female undergraduates there are in both mechanical engineering and bioengineering. And for that reason, she looked upon me as a role model. And I've since taken what she said to heart. And I really feel very strongly that I need to interact more with undergraduates, and I need to just show them that, you know, these are options that we all have as undergraduates or graduate students, and that there are things that there are hurdles, but if you have strong network that can help you pass these hurdles.
I felt that I have to be frank, even Asian students, they do expect different things from Asian women faculty. So I feel we're not treated all equally, because it's both who you are and what the other side, how they expect from you.
This first class that I taught, the last day of class, an Asian woman student approached me and she said, I have a question. I've been wondering this for the whole class. And I assumed she was going to ask me something about the bacteria growing on her plate. But actually she said, what's your ethnic background? I started to talk to her, and then it was sort of like a circle of all these Asian women students having this casual conversation. It was really the opposite of the way that white people in my upbringing asked me that same question.
I definitely consider myself a role model, but I did not realize to the extent, mostly I thought of myself as a role model for women engineers, but I didn't think of myself as an Asian woman professor role model until I had a bioengineering undergraduate who actually told my postdoc that I was the only bioengineering professor who was Asian and female. When my postdoc told me this, I was like, I can't believe that. And then I looked on the websites and I was like, sure enough, I was the only one.
I don't particularly want to be a role model, but I know that I am. The reason I don't want to be is it's just, I feel like a lot of pressure to do a good job with it. But the reason that I realize that I am is the first time that I taught here at Berkeley, I went into the classroom and I couldn't believe most of the students were Asian, and especially Asian women. And having grown up with and been surrounded by almost all white people before that, it was quite different. I think I was a role model in that class. And it was just a really nice, pleasant experience to just have this casual conversation with a group of students in my class.
Although my life at Berkeley had faced some challenges, I'm grateful to have this job that pays me to do what I really like to do. It was a dream come true to be a professor at UC Berkeley. But my experiences in fighting against discrimination really made me a champion against injustice in any kind. And I have since become a supporter of affirmative action. And also I support Black Lives Matter because I learned so much from the recent events and from our students. I'm very passionate about promoting the well-being of Asian American women. We were brought up to work hard, but we need to be modest, obedient, and not causing any trouble. Well, sometimes, being a model minority really stands in the way for us to succeed and to reach our full potential. The way to change the stereotypical bias is to start from ourselves. And that's why I encourage that we communicate with each other, share our experiences. Together, we will understand ourselves better and our role and position in our community. And in this way, we can also change how other people view us and find peace in our own mind and live happy and productive lives.
When I first moved to California, it was such a different experience from everywhere else I had lived. And it's because of the diversity in the population in the Bay Area. I felt like people treated me as a whole person for the first time, in the sense that I can walk into a boba shop and order my tea. And so then I tell them my name. No one freaks out, like, what does your name mean? Or anything like that. They just write my name on the cup. They call my name and they give me my drink. And then that's it. But there are other minorities, especially in academia, who are more like in the position that I was as a kid, that they're getting all these messages that you don't belong here and that you're an other, you're an outsider. And so I feel like I can use my personal experience to understand and somehow try to make it better for other minorities.
The advice that I like to give Asian American women is to be able to really speak up when you have something in mind, come to practice that, and it's okay for you to have an opinion.
Be more patient with your parents and have respect for them.
It's okay to have self-care time and still take care of your family, but just learn to balance that rather than just putting 100%, 200% of your effort to make everything work for the family.
Don't roll with the status quo. Like, if someone says something and you're disrespected, call them out. Do not be like, oh, I'm sure it was just no, you should tell them exactly how it makes you feel.